Hi guys and welcome back. And today we get on with building the MiniArt 1/35 scale French Café. So this is kit number 35513 and according to ScaleMates was first produced in 2008. And I think it's worth noting that MiniArt are located in the Ukraine, and in fact they're just probably southeast of Kyiv. And one of the Russian advances is probably just a little bit north of where their manufacturing factory is. So, I mean, it's just a horrible situation, and I'm not going to go on a great rant about it. I mean, the facts are it simply should not be happening, and it is an absolute disgrace. And obviously, all our hearts go out to the Ukrainian people, and I think as modelers, perhaps support MiniArt if you can, and pick up a kit. I know it probably doesn't seem like very much, but it may well help a little bit. And also for my Ukrainian and Russian subscribers and viewers, and there are actually a few, my Russian viewers often up in about the top 10 geographies every video. The rest of the world doesn't blame the Russian people for what's going on. We only blame one person, and I think we're all united in that, and that's Putin. He's lying to you. I know he controls the state media with an iron fist, so you probably don't get all the accurate news that you should, but believe me, you are being lied to, and he is an absolute despot and needs to be dealt with. On that note, that's all I'm going to say on the matter. It's wrong, and we all know it's wrong. We'll move on to happier things and watch me actually butcher this French cafe and then salvage it a little bit. Hang on, it'll be exciting. Now, it's fair to say I've got a bit of a love-hate relationship with the MiniArt buildings because they're vacuum formed, so they're a bit flimsy, and I just find it very hard to get them to go together. And in fact, often they don't appear to match where they're supposed to. So as you can see here, I'm sort of struggling with, well, this is just the first piece, and I can't get them to line up, and there's gaps, and I know I'm not the greatest modeler in the world, but I can identify part A and part B, and don't go together. So I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, crikey. And I don't really want the damage, because this is early in the war when the Germans attempt to invade the Netherlands, and of course the mighty Caledonian army puts a stop to that. So what am I going to do? It's just wrong. Thinking. No, I can't deal with this. I'm going to go radical. And so, within the space of the first 5 minutes of this build, I've decided I'm going to do a complete conversion and turn this into an undamaged Dutch shop. I haven't quite figured out what the shop will be yet, so I'm really open to suggestions of what you think the shop should be, or shops, as you'll find out as we go along. And basically just took the X-Acto to it and started to prepare for the next stage, which was turning it into something undamaged. So filled up all the damage gaps with some putty and did the same sort of reduction on all the other pieces, cut off all the broken bits where I could, and filled or replaced with some styrene in that case to get a nice flat surface on the top side of the underside of the roof. A few little holes that need to be filled in, but basically, after a couple of days' work, got it to a point where they were effectively unbroken. So why have I done all that? Because I want to make some silicone molds of these components and then cast them in resin. So just using some foam board here to make the formwork for the molds. A, because it's really easy to work with. B, because I had it lying around. And C, because they're only small, so there's not a lot of structural integrity required to keep it all together. So just slicing up a base and 4 sides, basically. It's very, very straightforward. And because I'm impatient, just using super glue. So super gluing the actual model to the base of the foam board, just so it doesn't move when I'm pouring the silicone. And then again, super glue on the sides to build up the walls. just using some pins to help hold everything together. And then they all set up ready for the pour. For the roof sections, because there was a bit of an overhang, I just used some plasticine to take that away. Didn't want the silicone getting in underneath there. Breaking news, Model Creator, a 3D design and printing service, is about to go live on Kickstarter. These guys have got me very excited. The first thing I've been excited about for a long time, since Pamela Anderson ran along the beach. Some fantastic looking figures. Check out Hamilkar Barkas' channel. He has painted the Rhodesian infantry man. Figures look really good. It's an opportunity for anyone who makes dioramas to design and pose the figures to their exact requirements. The Kickstarter, depending on when you're watching this, is either just about to launch or will have just launched. The video will be going up Monday night Australian time, so check it out. There'll be links in the description below to the Kickstarter and to their website. I'm really looking forward to it. So time to mix up some silicone, and I use like all of them, part A and part B, but they are equal by volume. So that makes it easy. I don't need scales, and I don't need to do complicated ratios of 1 part to 7 parts or whatever, because I just wouldn't be able to do it. And fundamentally just pour in part A into a cup, and then pour part B into a cup, and then pour them both into another cup. Now, you don't have to do it that way, but that's the way I do it. And then stir like crazy. You've got a fair bit of working time with this. I just give what I'm now going to call the blanks, or the masters, a bit of a spray with a release agent. And then pour the silicone. And I try and pour it from a fair height, and try and pour it into the one spot. And I've come to learn through watching a brilliant guy called Robert Tolone. The reason why people tell you to do that is it allows the silicone to move slowly over the surface of your master. And in doing so, it's pushing the air ahead of the silicone. So you are less likely to get any little bubbles. Robert hates bubbles. And this is probably the first time I've been disciplined enough to pour it exactly like that without draping it over the actual master. And I'd have to say, I don't think I got one bubble at all, which I was really, really happy about. So just a tip, if you're ever going to embark upon some silicone mold making, don't drape the master, just pour until it's naturally flowed over. So this is the roof mold, demolded, and this is the large one, which I took a little bit longer. And look, I was doing all this with just basically leftovers of stuff that I had. So the silicone that I used, some of it was clear, some of it is the more traditional pink stuff that I use. I pour it pretty thick, and I dare say the purists would say that's too thick, but I like the substance of it, so it's not flimsy. It's easier for me to work with. Just doing a little bit of a cleanup of any of the flash, and the flash wasn't too bad. And a pair of scissors, again, that I've learned from Robert, is actually a better thing to cut this stuff off with than rooting around with an X-Acto or anything else. Just checking the overhang there, because that's where the corners join. And really happy. Got some pretty crisp moldings out of what were, spur of the moment decision to go down this path, and not brilliantly prepared masters, I have to say. Now, the resin pour is virtually exactly the same as the silicone pour, That's an A-B mixture. E by volume, the same, so just measure them up side by side. It's not that scientific. Whack them in together. Now, the difference between the silicone and this resin is this resin has a working time of about 2 minutes. So doing about 5 moulds, so I had about 30 seconds to mix it up, and then, as you see, pouring it. And because this was trying to defy gravity and go uphill, I couldn't just pour it into the one spot like I should have, and I had to end up sort of moving it around. And you can see the consequence of that is that there are quite a few bubbles, but they're all on the back end of it, so they can be sanded flat, and hence not too worried about it. I was a bit smarter with the second section. I poured at the high end and let it roll down to the low end. Still, you can see I'm not consistent in my pouring in the one spot. I think I was scared that it was going to overflow, and it sort of bulged a little bit. This isn't a great pour. I was nervous about my working time, and as you can see now, I've completely lost it, and I'm just pouring it everywhere like a lunatic. And watch, bang. You can just literally see it go off, and it goes off faster. Why is it going off in this mold and not the first two? And you can see that's now starting to go off. The more volume there is, the deeper it is, the greater heat it generates, and hence it goes off, and that is crap. That's not too bad. But what I am happy with is, all right, the arse end of them is all a bit yuck, but the actual detail, so the silicone molds really did their job well and captured a good bit of detail. So this is a second pour where I didn't pour it right up to the brim. A little bit smarter on the second pour. That was a little bit too much even there, but has got me a couple of facades. And again, very happy with the level of detail that came out of it. So just breaking up the mold formworks here. And I probably didn't show it, I should say. I also sealed around the edges with hot glues to prevent any leakage. That's why it's a little bit hard to get the foam board apart. And just being careful taking that off because they've both got overhangs. Quick clean up with the skizzers. And that is what happens if you take too long. I was going to pour the surplus into an old mould for a couple of boxes. Now, look, it's a bit rough and ready around the edges. I mean, as I said, the form, the masters weren't brilliantly prepared. But I sort of think once I get to this stage, that's when modelling takes over, and you can fill gaps and cracks and what have you. So this is me joining the two buildings together, and I wanted a mechanical join. I didn't want to glue it because I know what I'm like, and I'm going to knock this thing and it's going to fall over. And I thought I just wanted the comfort of having it actually bolted together, which is probably overkill in the scheme of things, but worked all right. Recess the screws so the heads don't poke out that side, which will be the most visible side. I've got a plan to hide the bolts. I couldn't be bothered recessing because then I would have had to make a bigger hole and what have you. Got to fill some cracks there in the joins, but by and large, it's easily done. I'm going to have the downpipe run through there, so that will take care of the vast majority of that. So into cleanup mode now, and basically this is me trying to make a pig's ear into a silk purse. And one of the things that was obvious with the whole casting and joining together was I was not having a square building at all. So some of the back bits were deeper than other back bits. Some of the cracks along the sides had caused it to be a bit out of whack. I wanted to put in some wooden flooring and just use balsa as a base for that to get the size right. And I also wanted it to be, at this stage, not permanently affixed because there's some other things that I want to do that require the flooring to come in and out. So with balsa, I cut across the grain with the saw, but I cut with the grain with the X-Acto. it just seems to come out nicer that way. I'm not sure if there's any actual science behind that. And one of my many failings is my tolerances are a little too tight. So I like everything to fit uber tight, which makes it a little bit hard for myself. And the flooring here is no exception to that. I literally have to put it back in on an angle. So to make the flooring, I just cut up some like little coffee stirrers or little icy pole sticks, whatever was at hand. And again, started using the PVA wood glue, but patience isn't one of my greatest virtues. So swapped over to using super glue, CA glue, and that's instant gratification. Using the saw to trim the edges off. And there we go. She fits in pretty good. So rinse and repeat to do that 4 times. I felt they were a bit too wide, so the subsequent ones I split the sticks down the middle and went for a smaller look, a narrower look. And then they needed some skirting boards, and the big tongue depressors that I've got have a sort of rounded edge on either side. And I tried, this is version 4, by the way. I tried a few different things, and you might even catch glimpses of them as the video unfolds. And some were bigger than they should be and a little bit uglier than they needed to be. Finally settled on this, and actually looks pretty good, especially with the smaller sized floorboards. That's what I like about the CA glue. You can get straight onto the next step without having to wait. Cut those off on a bit of an angle, and you'll see why later on. It gives me the opportunity to have a nice join in the corner. Not perfect, but no one will actually see that corner of the floor. So again, a lot of the stuff that I do here in this sort of thing too is experimental and practice. I've got visions of making a very complicated hotel interior, multi-floors, multi-rooms, and that'd all be from scratch. So sometimes I just practice with that ultimate end goal in mind. And there's a plan for that, which you'll see right at the very end. I'll tell you what, you guys have suffered listening to me for about 20 minutes now, so this is all self-evident. Putting in some putty, just filling some holes, doing a bit of sanding, and putting some timber around just to clean everything up. So I'll leave you with some music for about 2 minutes, and then I'll come back with something that might be more worthy of explanation. So on to doing all the bits and bobs to dress up the facades, and first attempt at printing out some gutters, and they came out okay. And drying them off after they get washed in the isopropyl alcohol. They can be tough to get off sometimes. I find this razor works pretty well without causing any damage. Not bad, but I tried to make joins at each end, little slots, but the stuff was, the overall size was too thin and I had some deformities at the end, so take 2. Change the alignment, put in some more supports, and probably got about 4 good ones out of the 5 that are there. But certainly not all perfect. But anyway, after 4 separate attempts, got enough guttering pieces to do the job. Then use some styrene tube with the MiniArt connectors and exits for the downpipe, and that will cover up all the sins of my poor filling across the front. 3D printed what I would refer to as a gully trap. That's how I remember them as a kid. My grandparents had a gully trap, which was sort of all the gutter water went into it, but it was opened. I'm not sure how common that is in Europe, but it sort of felt like it would be a good thing to have. Did a couple of little lamp shades, so you know now what the holes are for. And again, made them a little bit too thin, and a second version will be a bit thicker. And then just trying to get things squared up a little bit. So the roof of the 2 buildings where it comes together, I have some issues with the very last row of tiles, in as much as it doesn't give you a square level back piece. But I had poured a few thinner sections of the roof tiles and just use those to cut them up. And as you can see, just stick them on. I just temporarily glued a little bit of foam board across the back to get a straight edge. And it was fundamentally just 1 row of tiles short. And that tile came off and stuck to my thumb, which took me ages to get off. So not too bad. Again, practice and not claiming to be perfection. I'll put something along there. It won't be that. That's too big. Probably a square, smaller version of that. And then I just thought I'd show you my messing around in Tinkercad to build the window frames and door frames, etc. And by no means am I an expert, and someone who is will probably look at this and go, "Man, you're doing that a hard way. You could do it much simpler." And I've simplified the process a lot in the last few months, just learning what I'm doing. But it's relatively easy to teach yourself how to use this if you watch a few YouTube tutorials. And yeah, I'm confident using this to produce geometric shapes. I can't use, at this stage, Blender to produce organic shapes. I am hopeless. And that is a much more complicated beast. And you need to have some artistic ability too to produce organic shapes. This is really just measurements and straight lines, so I can deal with that. This is about version 5 of me producing door frames and window frames. So I discovered that if I put a slot down the sides as a guide for my Tamiya saw, it made things a lot easier than trying to, because you tend to get a little bit of bleed of resin on the bottom. It prints a few thicker layers to help it adhere to the build plate, and that can get a bit ugly. So I like to be able to take the edges off and leave it with a nice crisp edge. So yeah, this is just me rooting around trying to make things turn 90 degrees and get them roughly into the right position. So this is just a quick demo for you guys to see how I go about doing the design for these. And it's relatively simple then, once that's done, to export it as an STL file. And I should be able to tell you what that means, but I don't think I can even say the first word. I think it's stereolithic. And then that's it coming off the print bed. Reasonably happy with that. So supports underneath the middle sections because they are suspended off the plate. And if you don't do the supports, then they just won't print. You get shit floating around in your resin vat. So little supports in there, it all needs to come out. my guiding lines for my Tamiya saw to get nice straight edges. And then, as is my wont, I mean, I was happy because my measurements were very, very, very good, and the tolerances are almost zero. I think it's like 0.1 of a micron. So most of the windows and doors fit in without any glue. Obviously, I'll glue them in later. And then just to give it a little bit of wood texture, I made this tool out of a Tamiya saw blade and just snapped off the end bit so it was small enough to get into the tight places. Whacked it on the end of an X-Acto, and I'll refine that with time because it moved around a little bit. I'll probably glue it into something else. Bit of a sanding, and then they don't look too bad, and I'm sure they'll take paint quite nicely. So I just needed to put some hinges on the door, and I'm just using a little bit of wire to do that. Tape the door down theoretically so it didn't move around, and I could just push the hinges into the right spot with the CA glue. A little bit of movement, fell down the hole, pushed it across, sorted. All right, well and truly into the home straight, using a little bit of Mr. Surfacer and just initially sponging that on and going for the recessed areas rather than the stuff that's slightly raised because I want to treat that slightly differently. I don't want it to have texture, I want it to be smooth. And then getting back in there with an old brush and just dabbing away at it. Stippling, I think is the right term, to try and get a slightly roughy, sort of concretey type surface. And that seemed to come out pretty well. So everything ready now for priming, and I'm using my neat and handy airbrush, which is battery operated, no wires, and I love it. I've been mucking around with this for about 3 months now, using the Vallejo grey surface primer, of course, and I like it. I really like it. Last time I used it, I took it outside, which was great freedom. It was a bit too windy when I was ready to paint these guys, so used it inside. They're acrylic paints, so it doesn't really matter, but ideal if you're using enamels, lacquer paints. If you want to do that outside, this is the thing. And for the outside, the Vallejo black. So look, so far I have to give it a big thumbs up. I have yet to use it on anything delicate, so I did the Zulu base, diorama base with it, and that worked really, really well. And I'd have to say the same for this. Putting the primer down, again, worked very, very well. Not having that hose is psychologically liberating, for lack of a better sentence. All right, so we're into the final reveal. So just give you a look at a number of still pictures for about the next 60 seconds, and then I'll come back to say goodbye. And so that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe got something out of it. As always, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch. I really do appreciate it. Like, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications. As you appreciate, I really look forward to your comments and always answer them. So look forward to hearing any of your input. What sort of shop should they be? That would be really helpful. Now, next up, I'm going to jump off the First Encounter diorama and go and start another new project, which I'm not sure is a smart thing to do because I've got more new projects started than I know what to do with. But anyway, it'll be very topical, not saying anything more than that. And I'm going to try and smash it out pretty quickly from start to finish. So thanks again, guys. Take care, everyone. Be careful, stay safe, and I will catch you in the next one.